This Rally hand plane has a really interesting modern design. Super innovative, very easy to use. It gets great results, and if you're a regular viewer to this channel, I don't recommend you buy it. This is probably going to be a pretty interesting video. The Rally 260 is a Swiss-made hand plane in a smoothing plane size, a lot like a Stanley No. 4. The body is made out of layers of steel that are assembled and then bolted together, instead of having a cast metal body or a wooden body like other planes. The knob and tote are made from a high-impact plastic that's totally comfortable, and the blade is a replaceable system where you have a tiny little blade that you don't sharpen. You replace it when it gets dull, but each blade is double-sided, so when you do get a dull edge, you just flip it over, and then you've got a fresh edge. And Rally makes a couple of different alloys for their blades, including a tungsten carbide one that, according to them, stays sharp for like 1,000,000 years. Now, I hear a lot of you saying, ugh, I can't use that thing, it's not traditional. Yeah, well, neither is that Stanley you like so much. I mean, when this thing came out in the late 1800s, it was space age. I mean, cast iron body, imported rosewood knob and tote, mechanical adjusters. This thing was crazy, especially when you take a look at the technology it was replacing. Rally is just doing exactly what Stanley did, using the best modern materials, trying to make something that works the best it can while being relatively economical. It's continuing exactly in the tradition of all the tools we love. Now, you would expect a guy like me, a little traditional, to not like plastic for the knob and the tote, but honestly, I think they're great. They're perfectly comfortable, really well designed. I like a 3-finger grip, but there's nowhere to put your index finger anyway, and they've redesigned the tote for a completely comfortable 4-finger grip. Here's the other thing. Because the tote is made out of plastic, you can keep stuff in it, like their little adjustment tool and a bunch of extra blades. And here's my favorite thing. Check this out. Okay, here's the tote. Ready? Watch this. Hold on, let me do it a little harder. I mean, I'm wailing on it pretty hard, and I dented it a little bit, but it didn't break. Try that with one of your wooden planes. Now, one thing I love about an old Stanley is how easy it is to dial in exactly the cut that you want. So you can put your plane on the wood and just start moving it back and forth, and then while you're planing, without even stopping, you can spin that adjuster knob forward until, oh, you hear that? It just started to engage, and boom. Just like that, feathery, beautiful shavings. Now, the Rally isn't like that because you can't reach forward with your index finger and grab that adjuster. There's nothing to grab. The adjuster is actually this lever over here, and it's obviously meant to be pushed on with your thumb. Now, that seems like a problem, but I actually have a good workaround, and maybe this is even what they had in mind. When I'm trying to set up my Rally plane, I just take my right hand and I put it on the side of the plane like this. There's even a nice comfortable place to rest it, and then I just push down on that lever with my thumb. So here I am planing, and I'm going to push, and oh, there it is. And then I go back to the tote. That's not quite enough. Hold on. That's it. So that's another nice shaving, and I was able to dial that in really easily. Shifting the hand position, it's not quite as convenient as the Stanley, but it's not bad. Now, comparing these two in use, the Stanley it's a little bit heavier, which I think is good. The Stanley's just about the right weight. The Rally is light, and I'm not one of those folks who goes in for super heavy hand planes. All things being equal, I think lighter is better, and the Rally is close enough to the Stanley. Now, that laminated steel construction does give it kind of a corrugated sole. A lot of old Stanleys came with a corrugated sole, and the idea was to reduce friction. In this case, I can't say it's reduced friction. If anything, I think maybe it's increased the friction a little bit. But the good news on that is you can use the Paul Sellers rag in a can oil trick. I use 3-in-1 oil. People have been asking me recently. And that cuts down on friction really nicely. Now, with this newfangled design, you might think that this plane was difficult to set up and use for the first time, but it's not true. Right out of the box, I took the Rally and I put it on the edge of this piece of construction spruce, and these are the very first shavings I took with this tool. It was a piece of cake and the results were excellent. So, the Rally hand plane is effective, easy to set up, and easy to use. And I still don't think you should buy one. Probably the coolest thing that Rally did with this plane was completely redo the guts of the hand plane. If this were a Stanley type plane, you'd see a frog down here and a bunch of familiar components, but it's all different with this. Let me show you how you change a blade with this. You start with the depth adjustment lever right here, and you flip that all the way up. Then there's a little black, retainer, I guess, and that swings all the way up and out of the way. And then the entire blade assembly just rotates up. You grab this red thing here, and the whole thing comes up. Now, you would expect you'd have to unlock this some way, but you actually don't. It's like a clamshell, and the two parts just come apart. Now, the blade just fell in like that, and of course it happened on camera. This is the first time the blade ever slipped out. It's never happened before, and I don't think it usually does. They've designed this super clever blade design that actually says Rally in little cutout letters, but it can only go into the retainer in one way, and it locks in place really nicely. Now, these aren't sharpenable, but they are two-sided. So once you've made one side dull, you just flip it around, it snaps in, and then you just close that clamshell. Here's the way you put it back together again. Let that whole assembly go back down into the plane, flip that retainer back down, and then here's the really cool part. When you push the depth adjuster lever down to its neutral position, that automatically puts tension on the whole assembly. So that quickly, this thing's ready to go again. All I have to do is put it on a piece of wood and just set my depth of cut, and the plane is ready to rock. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that there's no lateral adjustment lever. We're used to seeing these on Stanley planes, but the Rally doesn't have one because they don't need one. These blades are disposable and they're not sharpenable, and sharpening is one of the main things that causes you to need lateral adjustment. Very difficult to sharpen a blade perfectly straight every single time, so you need a little bit of adjustment in there to correct for out-of-square sharpening. If you're never sharpening the blade, you don't need that. Now, there's one more really cool feature, which is you might be thinking about the chip breaker. So here's a Stanley blade, and the iron is on the back here, and then on the top there's the chip breaker, which lifts the shaving and cuts back on tear out. It seems like the Rally doesn't have a chip breaker, but it's actually integrated into the design. The top of that clamshell blade holder assembly, that is the chip breaker. So as soon as you put that down, the chip breaker is in place. Even cooler, this back piece here is actually an adjuster. You can pull it back or push it forward, and there's a wrench you can use in case you can't grab it easily with your hand, and that sets the distance from the chip breaker to the edge of the blade. You might think that's no big deal, but the distance of the chip breaker to the edge has so much to do with the shaving you can take. If you want a light finishing cut, you need that chip breaker set super close to the edge. If you're roughing something out, that chip breaker needs to come back. On a Stanley plane, you've got to take the assembly out, loosen that big screw back there, and manually change that setting and put the plane back together. With the Rally, you can change the setting of the chip breaker without even taking the thing apart. It's a pretty impressive feature. It's all very well to take a plane like this and put it through some laboratory bench tests, but what about real-world woodworking? How does this plane work on an actual project? Well, good news. A neighbor of mine just asked me to help him put up some kitchen shelves. He wanted to make them out of white pine to save money, and we added 3/4-inch red oak trim to make the edges more durable and make the shelves a little bit stiffer. Now, these shelves are going to be painted, and since we used putty and pin nails to install the trim, I did do some sanding, but there were a bunch of jobs where a hand plane was a better and faster tool. It's a great time to try out the Rally. These are flat sawn white pine shelves, and of course they cupped. There's a big hump all down the middle of the board. This would take forever to sand out, so I'm leveling it. Now this is where I thought the rally wasn't going to work well. I expected to see plain tracks from a totally flat, straight iron. There's no way they cambered these little disposable irons, right? Well, actually, I was wrong. As I'm planing this big surface, I'm actually getting a beautiful finish, no lines, no tracks, and a glistening, shiny surface. And of course, I took one of the blades out and looked at it very closely with a straight edge, and I'll be darned, these things are cambered and they have the corners knocked off. The people at Rally actually understand hand planes, and they know what you need when you're working on a big, flat surface. Now, all of this is just with white pine, and that's not very impressive for any tool. But that trim is made of oak, and red oak is a wood I use all the time. A plane that does a good job on oak is pretty good with me. I left that trim proud of the surface of the shelf, knowing that I would need to level it down later to make everything perfectly flat. The Rally handled it perfectly. It's doing just as good a job on hardwood as it does on softwood, and the fact that it can handle both is great. It's a versatile tool. Now, since we're painting these shelves, we didn't miter the trim at the corner. We just did a little bit of a butt joint, and I left one side intentionally long, knowing that I could flatten it out later and get a nice smooth corner. The Rally was what I was going to try on that, but I didn't know how it was going to do with that squishy oak end grain. There's a lot of pores and voids in that wood, but the Rally came right across it with a skewed cut and actually did a great job. I got a nice, smooth surface, and the grain looks clear, the pores are open. It's what you would want even for fine woodworking. And, of course, we had to do all that general trimming that you do, easing edges and knocking off corners, and I put a light 1/8 inch bevel all around the oak trim so that it's going to be more durable as things smack into it. The Rally handled all of that stuff. And as a final test, I even got out my shooting board, grabbed a scrap of wood, and shot with the Rally. And it was comfortable and did a good job. A little bit light, but no problem. I still got nicely trimmed end grain. Well played, Rally. It's pretty impressive. Now, as I was using it on these shelves, I couldn't help but notice I couldn't quite get the shaving that I wanted all the time. I couldn't get a super fine shaving like I can get with my Stanley. With these high-quality blades and this super adjustable lever, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. It almost felt like the sole of the plane wasn't flat. But of course, with this construction, it had to be flat, right? Wrong. The Rally is actually a little bit out of flat. It took me a couple days to figure out what was going on because I just assumed this construction had to be flat, but there's actually a little hump right behind the blade. It's so small I can't really show it to you, but you can hear it. Check it out. You hear that? That's the straight edge rocking back and forth on that hump in the steel. Let's see if we can sort that out right now live on camera. So I always do the same thing with this. Do a little bit of Sharpie so I can tell where I've made progress. And now we'll do a couple of strokes on this sandpaper. This is 150 grit. It's not too aggressive, and I don't have a blade in here at all, but I have all the rest of the controls engaged, so the plane is under tension like it would be when I'm using it normally. Let's see. Okay, and you can see right here, there's a shiny bare spot right there, and that's where the hump is. The trick is I have to get that hump out without rocking back and forth as I go and just making even more of a banana-shaped sole. So let's see here. This is a little bit closer to the front, so I'm going to push down on the front and make that register and try to bring the front and the hump down to where the rear of the plane is. Let's try. Bigger shiny spot here, and we're getting rid of the marker up here, but it's not gone yet. I'm going to do a lot more lapping, moving around on the paper, and changing the direction of the plane. Getting much closer, but we're actually pretty out of flat. You can see how I've taken off material here, but nothing here. This isn't at all what I was expecting. What I've got here is what I would have with a lot of my vintage planes. It's flat here, here, and here, and there's a little hollow right here in the back. I could drive myself crazy trying to grind this out, but there's no reason to. I've got a good flat bearing surface, and this won't hurt anything. I have to admit, I'm surprised this plane was out of flat, but this is only 150 grit paper, and it's taken me less than 10 minutes to fix. So really not a big deal. Obviously, I really like what Rally has done here. I really want to recommend this tool, but I can't because of the disposable blades. Once in a while on this channel, you've seen me recommend a saw with a disposable blade. And I don't mind those so much because saws don't get sharpened that often. But planes, chisels, knives, these things are different. We sharpen them all the time. We need constant razor sharpness. Now I think what Rally was going for here was carpenters and contractors, people who are on job sites who maybe don't even use hand planes right now, but they would if they got one of these, and then they would have the perfect tool for easing in that piece of trim or fixing that stuck door, all sorts of things. And on a busy job site, I mean, look, I've been on enough job sites to know you're not going to be the guy who's getting out his oil stones and putting a fresh edge on his blade. That's not going to work. But that's not what this channel is about. This channel is about hobby woodworking. It's about, can I say it? Artisanal furniture making. We're at least trying to make really nice furniture, stuff we can leave to our kids and grandkids. And in a situation like that, disposable blade tools, that just doesn't make sense. You might be thinking, you know what, I'm going to get one of these to see if I even like hand planes. But if you do, this is only the smoother size. You're going to want a jack plane. You're probably going to want a scrub plane or a four plane, eventually a jointer plane, maybe a low angle plane or a shooting board plane. And guess what? Every one of those is sharpened a little bit differently, a different amount of camber, a different level of sharpness, a different angle. There's all sorts of things to learn to set up each one of those individual tools correctly. And for that, you need sharpening. As you're doing more and more woodwork, you're also going to run into difficult grain, twisting, reversing grain that tears out super easily. When I run into that problem, I take my nicest plane, I resharpen the blade so it's razor sharp, take a super light cut, and I don't get tear out on that difficult grain because I can sharpen and go at it with a fresh blade. With a tool like this, every time you put in a blade, that's as sharp as that edge is ever going to be. And if you run into difficult grain, well, even if that blade's not dull yet, you're still going to have to swap it out for a fresh one, and maybe another fresh one before you've done all the work. It's a little wasteful. And once you've thrown away a few of them, well, what happens when you run out of blades? What, are you not going to do any woodwork? I can't get behind that. The last thing that happens with any edge tool is the possibility of damage. It happens to everybody. On this video, for the project I was just showing you, the kitchen shelves, I nicked one of the trim nails I used to put in the trim. And of course, that put a little notch in the blade, which I didn't even notice until I started getting lines and tracks in my work. If I had been using one of my normal hand planes, I just would have stopped, honed the edge really quickly, and the problem would have been solved. The blade in here wasn't even close to being dull, but because I nicked it, it was ruined, and I had to switch to another one. This just doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Furniture making without sharpening is like cooking without heat. It's nonsense. And I look at an awesome tool like this, and I get so frustrated, and you know what? Rally Tools, meet me at camera 2. Rally, at this point, I hope it's obvious that I love almost everything you've done here. The forward-thinking manufacturing, the modern, durable materials, the thoughtful adjustment mechanism. Almost everything about this is great, except, obviously, for the disposable blades. And this is my hill to die on. Everything else about this tool is amazing, but I am never going to get on board with disposable bladed tools. Take what you've done here take everything about it and fit it with a high-quality, resharpenable blade. I will buy one with my own money. I will review it. I will tell the world about it. Okay, maybe not the world, maybe just the small corner of the world that watches this YouTube channel, but you get the idea. This is the direction that I really think tools need to go in. We have to get away from these traditional notions. We need tools that work, and this is a tool that works. If you can ever make that change to it, I'll do everything I can to tell people about it. And even if you don't, this is still really cool, and I congratulate you on your achievement. Now, there's one last thing we should talk about here, which is price. And yeah, that is a tiny bit of a sticking point. I paid $196 for this plane, which is kind of a lot. It's on sale right this second for $169. That's a pretty good deal. So, maybe that's the direction you want to go. Once we're getting into the $200 territory, I have to mention that you can buy the Veritas low-angle smoothing plane for, I think, $220, and this is like a really, really, really nice tool. I don't even like low-angle planes particularly, but if you've got $200 to spend on a hand plane, this is where I would put my money. But also, when I say the words $200 hand plane, part of me is just filled with disgust because there are still so many good old Stanleys in the world. I bought this one just a couple of months ago off eBay for $35, plus I think $10 of shipping. As long as these tools are out there, maybe you'll go for the Veritas, maybe. I really can't imagine going for a disposable bladed tool. Whatever the shortcomings of the Stanley, these have stood the test of time. This tool has been around for half a century, 70 years, and it's got another 100 years in it, easy. And there's so many of them, and they're inexpensive. Yes, on eBay, yes, right now. In fact, we have an entire video that shows you the whole history of Stanley hand planes and is also going to show you how to find the best deals on some of the overlooked models. We'll put a link to that down in the description, and you can check that out. Once you have your plane, you might want to take our new plane restoration course. Over 3 hours of ultra detailed information that will tell you how to disassemble, clean, de-rust, oil, reassemble, tune, sharpen, finish the wood, everything. We cover absolutely everything. And the course is available at a really good price. In fact, I think we forgot to take it off sale from the holidays, so I think you can still get it on sale. And of course, my patrons, they didn't just get it on sale, they got it for half off, which is the biggest discount I gave anybody. If you'd like to become a patron and get a ton of rewards and get the half price on that course, go on over to patreon.com/RexKrueger and check out all the rewards we have for the people who make this content possible. One more shout out to Rally Hand Planes, an obviously great company doing really interesting things. And of course, to my viewers, we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks so much for watching.